My name is Ligaya Figueras. I am the former food and dining editor for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. My last day was on Tuesday, and now I get to be retired. Yay, woohoo. I know. If you are somebody who's been coming to these sessions, this is now our third one. I'm just going to quickly tell the same story, but I really love this festival. It's my favorite in all of Atlanta, and it really is personal to me. I came here in 2015. My husband, who is here, we arrived the night before, drove overnight kind of feeling, slept, woke up. We went to the festival where a lot of food media in Atlanta were gathered, got to meet some of those folks. And so it was the first festival, and then for a number of years I've been honored to stand on the culinary stage and moderate. So it's very much full circle to bookend my time at the AJC here on this stage. So yay! Woohoo! We made it! 10 years! And this festival is actually now in its 20th year. So very neat milestones that we are celebrating right now. So again, thank you for coming. Before we get started, just a few things. The restrooms are in the rear. The ladies' room is to the right, gentlemen to the left. This session is 45 minutes, and we're going to go ahead and take questions throughout. We definitely will save the last 5 minutes for your questions, but if at any time you want to ask Steven Satterfield a question, please just raise your hand and I'll run on over to you. So let's get started. Our next chef is practically a household name in Atlanta. I think so, at least. Chef Steven Satterfield is the co-owner, along with business partner Neil McCarthy, of two local restaurants, Miller Union in West Midtown and Madeira Park in Ponce Highland. Steven has been the recipient of umpteen accolades, including winning the James Beard Foundation's Best Chef Southeast in 2017. And Miller Union has been recognized as one of the country's best restaurants by Eater, Esquire, and Bon Appetit. However, I want to add this. Miller Union and Madeira Park were both named to the AJC's 2025 Atlanta 50, which published just last week. It's the first time in a decade. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's the first time in a decade that we came out with our best restaurants list. It's the top 50. It took all summer of eating with me and my fellow dining critic, and we're really proud of the methodology that we followed. So we ranked the top 10, one of them being Madeira Park, and then the list is 50, and obviously the Miller Union was on that list too. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. You can see it at ajc.com/Atlanta50, and then check those places out. See which ones you've tried and which ones still need to be tried. Moving on. Okay, shameless plug. Sorry there. Steven is the author of two cookbooks, Route to Leave. That was in 2015. And now his latest one that came out in 2023, Vegetable Revelations. I think of Steven as like the vegetable whisperer. If you ask folks in the local food community to name a chef driven by sustainability, his name is always rising to the top. He's been involved with Slow Food Atlanta, served on the Atlanta Mayor's Office Food Waste Advisory Committee, member of Georgia Organics. He has such a relationship that's so deep with farmers, and one of the greatest reasons why you should be eating at Miller Union. So everybody, please welcome Steven Satterfield.
Thank you so much. It's, to stop and listen to all that, it's kind of overwhelming. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished here. We appreciate all of you patrons for coming to Miller Union for all those many years. We're about to turn 16 in November, so we're going to have a quinceanera or something. A sweet 16. So I write books about vegetables for basic cooking home cooks. And I came to cooking a little bit later in life, so I can relate to learning how to cook at home and how to make food taste great, especially vegetables. Root to Leaf was my first book, as Ligaya mentioned, and that book to me is more about like simple, seasonal, and southern. And Vegetable Revelations, which came out 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, is really more about a global pantry applied to vegetables. So kind of like punching up the flavors a little bit with really interesting flavor combinations and taking inspiration from other cultures and other chefs that I've learned from. So today the recipe that I'm making is a Portuguese bread soup, and it's a kind of a staple in Portuguese culture to use some leftover bread and some odds and ends, and always a poached egg in the soup for a really hearty and simple, delicious thing to make with things that you probably already have in your house. This is my greens chapter, and I chose Swiss chard to be the star of the vegetable side of this dish. There are sometimes greens, sometimes not, but it always has cilantro and garlic and lemon and olive oil. So, chard. I don't like to call it Swiss chard anymore. I think it's just chard is fine, right? Because it grows here. And this is the season we just started seeing it come in from some of the local farms. So in the fall, we get all those beautiful greens. And chard is kind of related to the beet a little bit, and also a little bit related to spinach. But it has its own kind of unique characteristics. It always has these beautiful stems. And there's some people that just think that the leaf is like jam and this part's too fibrous to use, but that's not the case. You just have to treat them differently. And so I talk about that a lot. I'm just taking the leaves off the stems here because I've been washed. But I talk about that a lot in Roots Leaf and in Vegetable Revelations. I'm going to call it Veg Rev for short because it's a mouthful. That when you have a fibrous stem, which is it's the architecture of the leaf, right? It holds it up so it can bask in the sunlight and get all the nutrients that it needs. But this is structural, so it's very fibrous, and it has long, stringy fibers, a lot like celery, that are pretty unpleasant if you were just to like take a bite out of it and try to gnaw on it. But if you cut it crosswise into short pieces, then you're shortening the length of those fibers to really small, and that's what makes it so much more palatable. We're also going to tenderize it by cooking it. So I'm just basically just going to cross-cut these stems. And we'll use the whole thing. So this is one bunch of shards we're starting with. And I'm going to get this just prepped and ready to go so that when we start cooking, this section is all meased out.
Stephen, I'm going to ask you a question, or many questions as you go along.
Sure.
But if anybody was in one of the earlier sessions, the first one with Mary Bryant Schrader, she was here discussing her book, The Modern Pantry, or The Modern Pioneer Pantry. And the two of you kind of share a little bit of a similarity in the sense of food preservation ideas. But while hers is guided more by an economic kitchen, so much of everything that you do seems to be revolving around, sustainability. And I'm wondering where that comes from. I mean, ever since I've known you, that's part of your approach to food. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's an ethos that drives pretty much your restaurant.
Yes. So here's the thing. Food waste, it starts with food waste for me. There's a sense of, like, there's an never-ending supply of food, and if something spoils in your fridge, you just go out and buy, a replacement or whatever. I have a really hard time with that. I think we need to value food a lot more and understand how precious it is. And I think when you start working with farmers and you get to know them and you understand how much work they put into it, they work just as hard as chefs. And to me, it's about respecting their work and really taking the pride of what they do and transferring that into your dish. And so, that said, I always try to use every part of plant, and that's something I preach about a lot, because you're spending your hard-earned money on it, and you have, sometimes parts and pieces that maybe not be commonly used like the beets with the tops on them, you can use the stems, you can use the leaves, not just the root. Or fennel, you can use the fronds. There's a lot of examples. But that for a restaurant, that stuff is really important to us too, because we're making a purchase, and if we throw away half of it, throw away your carrot tops or your fennel fronds, that's money thrown away, right? And so if you can find ways to use them, you're going to, it helps you be more creative. You can find really delicious ways to use them, and it just, the only little things that are going into the compost bin are the, whatever you peeled or whatever scrap you generate. So I think that's a really important concept in my cooking. That's definitely a theme, a thread throughout everything that I do.
And also, so Root to Lead published in 2015, and then, it's like 8 years later. What made you decide that it was time to write another cookbook? And I also want to know about the word revelations, because is it your revelations, or is it ones for us? Maybe both, but yeah,
right.
Like, how did you decide it was
question.
time?
Well, I'm going to start with the title, because the working title was not that. And that title changed when we completed the book in the final draft before we turned it to the publisher, because it was really it was going to be called Vegetable Revolution, and I think the more, and I worked with a co-author. Her name's Andrea Slonaker, and she is a cookbook author in Portland, Oregon. We were sequestered at a lake house to do the final edits, and so we waited till the end to write the introduction, which I think is a very good move in a cookbook situation, because you've completed all the work, and then you can really see the themes, and having somebody to bounce it off with is also helpful. Real quick, while I'm talking, I'm going to chop up the cilantro, and I'm going to use the stems too, okay? Just like we were talking about. So, I think what she said to me is like, this is not a revolution, it's all about your revelations, about these discoveries that you made since your first book. And she's like, I think we should change the title. And I had to sit with it for a minute. We slept on it, and the next day we were leaving and rushing back to Atlanta to get our manuscript turned in. And I thought it was the perfect name. And so we had to then get the approval from Karen Rinaldi, my publisher, Harper Wave, and she, she's a very reasonable person. If you explain it in a way that makes sense, she gets on board. And so she loved it, and that's how the title came to be. But the book itself was something that had been stirring in my mind for a while. I had actually started a proposal for a no-waste cookbook, and using these principles as like the guiding theme in the book. And the more we got into that concept with my agent and my publisher, we were noticing that there was a lot of guilt built into the writing, into the proposal, like guilting the right? And I didn't want to do that, because I felt like it was not fair, and it was kind of like food waste shaming. So instead, we turned to this other theme that was happening in my professional life, which was opening up to more global influences on the food, both in Northern Union and home. And from there, that became the new theme, and we just interwove the no waste into the recipes without shaming people. So that's how it came about. And I think it's a great story, because writing a cookbook is a very personal experience. Writing anything is personal, but you're putting your ideas about food onto pages, and you hope people are going to cook it. And when we did the proposal, by the time it was approved, we were in the pandemic, and so we were green-lighted to start producing the book, and it was a very hard time, because we were all wearing masks, and there was no vaccine yet, and we had to start shooting the wrong timeline. You have a date, a due date that you have to meet. And she was a little flexible because of the situation, but we definitely had to get started, And so I did everything locally. I worked with Andrew Thomas, the local food photographer, who's a great friend, and we became super close during that. Andrea, who was in Portland, we had met before, and her husband's a winemaker who sells his wines. And I got to know her from him, and she and I did everything remotely. Like, everything. We did it all in Google Docs. We had long 3-hour phone calls, walking through recipes. She tested everything after I made it, and then we would compare notes. So it was a really interesting exercise because we weren't physically in the same space. But it was actually, I think, a pretty cool outcome because the way she tests is very methodical, and she is an excellent food writer. So it was a really good situation, despite all the challenges.
Were any of the recipes modified because of the pandemic or birthed within the pandemic?
I left some room for creativity in the studio. So there were I also worked with Tom Driver, who's a pop stylist, an old friend of mine, and he would, text me leading up to the shoot. He's like, "What is this dish going to look like?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm making it for the first time because I had no time to test it." So I was using the studio as a test kitchen because I was also trying to save my restaurant from closing and pivoting every which way you can think of. And so there was some room for experimenting a little bit. It was like an idea that I wanted to try, and most of them worked out great. If I didn't get it perfectly right the first time, we would at least get a great shot, and then I would reverse engineer the recipe to work perfectly at home, but maybe it wasn't the way I wanted to make it on set. So that kind of stuff. It was a very interesting way to work for sure. Real quick, I'm making a cilantro sauce. It's real simple. It's just cilantro, garlic, and olive oil, and a pinch of salt. So that's what it's going to be stirred into the soup at the end.
Okay, so back to the cookbook. It's interesting because what's your deck? Inspiration for produce forward cooking. So you're not shaming us to be carnivorous. And I'm wondering for you, when it was within the book as well as just yourself, how do animal-based proteins fit into your kind of preferred style of cooking?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm an omnivore, but I eat a very produce-forward diet. So, to me, if there's a day that goes by where no vegetables were consumed, that's a fail. I think it's super important to eat fruits and vegetables as many times as you can throughout the day, whether it's raw, cooked, steamed, broiled, whatever. Sorry, what was the...
Well, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
So, there is a use of meat in there, but it's very light.
I want to point out too. I don't know if you can see this here, but on the cover, there is some sausage and some lamb and some fish hanging from above, and all the vegetables are the cornucopia at the bottom. And I didn't want it to be perceived as a vegetarian book because it's not. But it could easily be a gift for a vegetarian. But there are some moments that are peppered in with chicken or sausage or fish or whatever. And it's really about, and this is kind of how I think about Miller Unit, it's about the vegetable part is the star, and the meat is just an accompaniment, right? And I've heard lots of my customers say that they choose their entree based on what the vegetable part of it is, and that's how I would order too. So I like that they're picking up what I'm putting down. Okay, I'm gonna just do the sauce really quick. Let me see if I know how to do this. Here we go. This is gonna be just like a chunky, rustic cilantro sauce. Let's see how it looks. Yeah. It kind of looks like a pesto, but it's just garlic, cilantro, olive oil, and just salt. And I'm just gonna put this. this is like the condiment that will be finished with the soup. Now, this recipe is called Portuguese bread soup, so we need to talk about the bread. We actually work with Little Tart Bakery for our sourdough right now at Miller Union. And we, conversely, buy our sourdough at Colette for Madeira Parks. They are next door neighbors, so we want to be good neighbors. Sourdough, I have some in a bowl somewhere. Here it is. This is just stale sourdough bread. Pain au levain is what it's called, which is a European-style sourdough. My absolute favorite bread. It's got a nice, good hearty crust, a beautiful crumb with some air pockets in it, and that great natural sour flavor. To this, I'm going to add some garlic, olive oil, and salt, and we're just going to make croutons. This is one of my favorite simple recipes. In Vegetable Revelations at the beginning, there's a section on basics recipes, and this is one of those basic recipes where you could make this and store them in an airtight container and have them around for topping salads or making the soup, or you could actually grind them further in a food processor and make breadcrumbs for pasta. Very flavorful, super simple, garlic, salt, olive oil bread. That's it, and it goes into the oven to get this stuff. I like to use a microplane for garlic. I know a lot of you have the garlic press. That's also totally acceptable. You can even chop it by hand, which takes a little more time. But I'll also tell you that we buy garlic whole in whole bulbs and peel it. We don't buy the already peeled stuff or the already chopped stuff. It makes a big difference, and we actually peel garlic to order, ahead of time during the day, so that we can know that it's super fresh. And when it's peeled and sits around for a while, it starts to get a little slimy after some time. But
is that bread totally dried out?
yeah, it's probably 3 days stale at this point. Now they do pretty decent hydration on the bread, so it's still got some sponginess to it, but it's pretty dry, pretty stale. And that's what you want to use. That makes the best crouton. If it's really fresh, it's going to take longer to become crispy because you're waiting for that moisture to evaporate. So just about a quarter cup of olive oil. I put some salt in here too. And then you toss this until it's really well coated. It just takes a minute to really move it around so that all that olive oil that maybe kind of sticking to the bowl gets soaked in by the bread. And then you'll just lay it onto a tray like this, pop it in the oven, and it takes about 10-12 minutes. There's no oven here, so we're screwed. No, I'm kidding. I went ahead and made them ahead of time. You can hear how
It's magic.
crunchy they are. So these are the croutons. So this is one recipe. It makes about 3.5 cups. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the soup. I'm going to take the instructions out of here. They can be useful later.
I
know how to use a Dutch oven.
You do. Is this a recipe that you learned when were you visiting Portugal or what?
I've not been to Portugal.
Okay.
Now, the story of this recipe is a friend of mine published a similar version, Scott Hucker, and I really loved the recipe. I made it one time, and I was like, this is so good, it could be maybe reimagined for Vegetable Relations, and called him up. Hey Scott, love this recipe. Do you mind if I do a version? And I'll name check you in the header. He's like, yeah, sure. I love that recipe. It's fun to write about. And he actually was writing about it when he lived in San Francisco, and he went to Bar Tartine, and they had a version of the soup. So I call it a friendship soup because it's sort of like you can take this recipe and you can make it your own based on whatever greens you have, whatever kind of bread you like. In this version, I put some beans in there to make it a little more hearty, but not necessary. That doesn't have to be there. I think the most important part is the bread, the flavorful broth, the cilantro sauce, and the poached egg, which is a real treat in a bowl of soup, let me tell you.
So are you using vegetable stock for that? Is that?
This one calls for chicken stock, but you could totally use vegetable stock. You could use mushroom stock. It's a dealer's choice, and that's one of the other things that I always try to reiterate in my books, especially in Vegetable Revelations, that there are things that you can just interchange and it's okay. And I know a lot of people really want to follow the recipe to a T, from the start to finish, and there's merit and value in that, but there's also license to play. And especially in the greens department, there's a lot of things you can interchange. You could do this with kale, you could do it with spinach, whatever. You could even just throw some arugula in at the very end and just wilt it. So there's options. Okay, so I'm starting with some diced onion.
That is really good olive oil. I can smell it from here.
We're seasoning. Every time I put something in a pan, I add a little bit of salt to reach the desired amount at the end. So each time you season, in this case, it's going to sweat the onions, so it's going to keep them from browning because it pulls the water out. And it also seasons the pot. And so every time I put something in, I add a little sprinkle of salt to help pull the flavors out into, especially if it's a soup, you want to really build it like that. So each time you add something, you add a little seasoning. We're also going to put some black pepper in here. Freshly ground is always the way to go. You get so much more flavor. Pepper has a lot of volatile oils in it, like essential oils. And if you get the pre-ground stuff, after it's been ground for a day or two, it's already getting that kind of dull flavor. That's not so great. So anytime you do it yourself, it's the way to go. This is onion, garlic, olive oil, salt, and pepper so far. Now I'm going to add these beautiful jewel tone chard stems. It will make the broth a little pink. That's okay. I like pink food sometimes. And again, because I did that, I expose it.
Okay, so you're teaching us about the no waste side of things, but when it comes to revelations of vegetables, for you, what do you think is like a really underappreciated, undervalued vegetable that we should be cooking with more?
Turnips.
Turnips. Why?
Because nobody thinks they like them. But I could change your mind about that. One of my favorite recipes in Vegetable Revelations is this grilled hikuri turnip, and you leave the tops on it. And it's this Japanese grilling method that I learned about when I was doing my research, and it's such a cool idea. You preheat the whole grill, and then right before you're about to cook, you turn one side off. And so the turnips, the bulbs, go onto the hot side, and then you drape the greens across the preheated grill that no longer has active heat underneath. So you're able to cook the turnips and control the cook on those while you're lightly charring the tops. And then I serve it with a miso scallion vinaigrette. It is so delicious. And hikuri turnips are a good gateway for people that don't like turnips because they're kind of like a cross between a turnip and a radish. They're a lot less starchy and they're more crunchy and sweet. They don't take long to cook either. You really don't want to cook them more than, it has to be like under 10 minutes or they're going to be mushy. But there's something to be said for the lowly purple top turnip. One of my favorite things to use in the wintertime. It has such a great sweetness to it when you cook it low and slow. You do have to peel them, where the hikuri turnip you can eat the skin, but I like to make like mashed green turnips instead of potatoes for like a braise.
Neeps. That would be like my husband and I got really big into turnips when we went after we went to Scotland a few years ago, and we were just cooking it down, treating them like mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
So good.
They're delicious. So I'll do like this. I'll start with onions. I'll put the diced turnips in there and put the lid on and let it sweat, and then I'll take a potato masher and mash them into the pot and add a little bit of cream and butter, just a touch, and a bit of nutmeg. It's absolutely wonderful. You put some braised short ribs on there, or you can even put, some braised chicken thighs, or just eat them with some greens on top. Whatever, it'd be great. But it's one of my favorite, like, old school Southern recipes. Okay, that's sweating along. I'm going to just run a knife over these so they're not big and bulky. Here. And just kind of gathering them with one hand and just basically just don't want to have like a big stringy piece of greens hanging out of my mouth when I'm eating this. Not a good look.
For both of your books, actually, did you adapt what you would typically do in a restaurant setting for the home cook, or is it? Sometimes, vegetables shine at your restaurants. So, is there too much that we are doing differently at home that you would be doing at the
That's a
restaurant?
really good question. I think that there's some recipes that we do in the restaurants that are absolutely replicatable at home. And then there's some that just have like too many methods that y'all would never want to do. So, it's all about, to me, sure, there's some people that want to take that challenge on and really like go there, but I think to me the best home recipes are ones that don't have too many sub-recipes, too many steps, because it just becomes an all-day thing, and then you're cursing my name because you spent your entire day in front of the stove. So yeah, I think it's better to lean into the stuff that's more easily replicated.
And also, how did you decide it was time to go ahead and add your stock?
Yep, so the onions and the stems were starting to look like they were breaking down a little bit, and so I added the stock. I'm going to go ahead and add these beans. They're already fully cooked, and they're just going to get warmed through. And then once this comes up to a simmer, I'll add the greens. In the meantime, I'm going to get these eggs going. How do you guys like to poach eggs? Not everybody's favorite move. I'll give you some good tips. The most important thing to know about poaching eggs is that you want to crack the eggs individually into little containers. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So, these are beautiful eggs. So I'll get started with 2 at a time, and then you have to do this little motion where you get the water moving like this, and then while it's swirling, you drop your egg in, and it goes on a little lazy river ride. And what that does is it kind of keeps the white sort of like in a little more of an orb around the yolk, and it helps just make it like look nice and pretty. There is a little splash of white vinegar in here, distilled vinegar, and that's a good trick for getting the whites to seize up with making that formation. So the water's not quite hot enough yet. I want to get it to a little bit of a simmer before I drop those in, so we don't have an egg fail.
All right. Well, no, I'll just keep asking you more questions.
Great.
When it comes to like the root to leaf type of stuff, what do you think is kind of like the most creative or unique entire use of a vegetable? For example, I know like carrot tops. Okay, we know we can make carrot top pesto. We know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
With root vegetables, we know we can use the top. We're going to use, the base. But what are some other interesting thoughts about, saving?
I did this one dish in root to leaf I really like a lot. It's pretty simple, but it's using baby beets, so they're more like about this size with the greens on there. And I treated the root and the stem and the leaf each differently, but they all go into the same dish. So I roasted the roots, peel them after they're roasted, cut them into kind of medium-sized dice. Cut the stalks crosswise and just saute them a little bit to tenderize, and then throw the greens in just at the end, just to barely wilt. And then it's like a grain bowl, so it's like farro and has nuts and fruit and cheese, and then you just toss it all together into this like really delicious and super colorful dish. Where one thing I will say, when you're working with beets, if they're the red beets, that you really have to place them in there so you don't turn everything pink, because it's not. Then it just looks like a pink mess. So that's a good chef trick when you're working with the red beets. Put some gloves on, place them in at the end where you want them, and then serve it so it looks like these little jewels hiding in the dish. Kale stems. What do I do with them? So again, they have the long fibers. You can cut them crosswise. Anytime I'm making like kale or collards or anything like that, I try to use the stems and I'll saute them first, and then later add the greens. Another thing I've done is juice them, because there is moisture inside of those stems, and you have little bits of kind of leaves attached to it too when you clean it. So I've juiced them before and made kale French toast. I know it sounds weird. It's in Vegetable Revelations, but you whisk the kale juice with a little bit of egg, and then soak some bread in it and pan fry it in butter. It's fantastic. Now, it's more of a savory application. It's not like, I serve it with eggs and ham, like greens, eggs, and ham. But you can also, I've done it before. Where I learned this dish, I was in Siena, Italy, at this slow food recognized restaurant, and they had this chicken liver pate or mousse that was served on these little crostini that were dark green, and it had like a cherry gas streak on it. It was fantastic, and I just could not figure out what it was. I was like, it tastes like some kind of brassica or something, and I had to get the chef to come out there to explain to me, and he didn't speak any English, but to understand, he kept saying he was using cavallonero, which is what they call Tuscan kale, lacinato kale, dinosaur kale. It has a lot of different names. It's the same thing, and so it translates to black cabbage. At first, I thought he was using cabbage, and then I realized cavallonero was the Tuscan kale. Made sense because we were in Tuscany. And he was taking the stems and juicing them to make these little crostini. So I've done that at a couple of events. It's a lot of fun. It tastes great. You don't even need to put any salt in the recipe, because the kale has such an earthy flavor that it translates into the salt that's in the bread is all you need. It's really good. Yeah, it's in Vegetable Revelations, the one in the same book that I'm doing a demo from right now. So yes, cool. While we're waiting on things to heat up, the way you construct this soup is you take the bread croutons and you just lay them in the bowl, and that's like the foundation, right? And then when we add the hot soup to it, they're going to drink up that liquid and they'll tenderize a little bit. Sometimes you'll get one that's a little more crisp, and sometimes you'll get one that swells with the soup base, and it's like a nice textural journey as you're eating the soup. It also clings, some of the egg will cling to the bread, and so it's a really, really fun dish to eat.
Are you going to be able to finish making it in 7 minutes?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question, and then I'm going to start taking questions here, because I know there's going to be a bunch. This is an opportunity to tell everybody about Madeira Park, which is your latest restaurant. Can you tell us
Absolutely
all about it?
So Madeira Park is a wine bar in Ponce Highland. Has anybody been? Whoa, wow, that's impressive. And we opened in February. It's something that Neil from Miller-Enan and I have wanted to do for a long time. We've traveled together. Every time we're somewhere, we always try to find a wine bar and see what other people are doing. we wanted to have a full service wine bar so that you could make dinner out of it if you want to, but you can also just come by, have a snack and a sip, and move on. It has been such a fun project. I'm so blown away by the reception we've had. The neighborhood seems super happy that we're there, and we have a really young team that are, they're all learning about wine and they're having a great time. So it's been a journey, and Oliver Hondard, we can call him Ollie, is the chef at Madeira Park. I was the opening chef, but he took the reins from me and started, working on the menu before we ever opened, and almost every single recipe is his. So he's done an incredible job with the food. And just if you want to taste some wine, or also try one of our really inventive cocktails that often use a wine-based, like Amaro or vermouth as the base, then come check it out. And I think we did a nice transformation on that space. Definitely has brightened up the block.
There's a very busy intersection right now of many restaurants that are all exciting to eat at. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and take some questions. If you have one, just please raise your hand.
I'm just curious about salt. Are you using kosher
I
salt?
tend to use kosher salt the most. Hi. I also like fine sea salt or flake sea salt. So those are the three pillars of salt for me. I would say kosher is probably the most everyday use. The fine sea salt, I'll use that for recipes where you're measuring for baking. So if you're baking and you want that true measurement, the fine sea salt measures like iodized salt. I just don't like the flavor or the concept of iodized salt. And then the flake sea salt for finishing, so something like Malden. And there's other brands out there now too, but that's a really nice way to add a final touch. And it's also great on desserts, flake sea salt. Like if you make a chocolate mousse or chocolate chip cookies, put a little of that salt on at the end while it's still warm. All right, so I'm wrapping up this soup here. You can see how beautiful the colors are. You got a little bit of those beans in there, the bread, and then these very slow poached eggs over here.
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed how much time you took cutting the cilantro, and then you put it in the food processor for your sauce.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, can I skip all the cutting
That's a great question. The reason why I cut it is because, like the other stems, it is fibrous, and so I'm cutting it crosswise to shorten those fibers so you don't have long stringy fibers in the when you have your finished sauce. Which the last step on this is to take some of this sauce and just kind of dab it around like that, and then you stir it in while you're eating, and it's so good. Hey, oh, here we go. I had no idea there was a camera there the whole time.
We are very high tech here.
Any final questions? Yeah. I put some lemon juice in there. And I'll tell you what, I always do lemon at the end when there's something green involved, because if you do it at the beginning, the green will start to turn gray, brown. So when we do lemon at the restaurants, we do it to order in our sauces. So if we have a chimichurri and we're adding lemon or vinegar, we do it in a small bowl to order and then spoon it over the top, so you're not doing a big batch with lemon in it. Because it won't hold, it will look ugly in a day. Another good tip. One more question. This might be our last one. I don't know. I think it's a no from the festival. But yeah, sorry about that.
So earlier you talked about the, I guess people have a little bit of disdain for turnips. What do you think about rutabagas?
About what?
Rutabaga.
Oh, I love rutabagas. First of all, I like all vegetables. You can't name one that I won't like. But I'm gonna turn these off. The rutabaga, it's great. It's a great substitute for potato. I think you can use rutabagas and turnips kind of interchangeably. Rutabagas are a bit sweeter, I think, when you cook them. So they're great mashed. They're great roasted. They're really good in stews. I'm a big fan. And if you buy them locally, they don't come with that big layer of wax on them. If you buy them in the supermarket, they're coated in wax, and it just keeps them from spoiling. But buy them from a local farm this winter, and you'll see the difference. They're really sweet. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are out of time. Thank you very much, Steven Satterfield.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations on all your successes.
Thank you. And I think we're selling copies of Vegetable Revelations, and I'm signing back over here, right?
You can go ahead and form a line. Steven's going to go over there. He can sign your book. And so I would invite you to come back. In a half hour, we next have Annette Joseph. She is the author of The Sweet Life at La Forteza.
Thank you.
So please join us at 1:45.